Hello, RWorld. Welcome back to another episode of RWorld Talk. I am your host, Chris Kresman, and we have a really special treat for you guys this morning. I know I say that all the time, that we're lucky to have a guest, that I'm excited to have a guest, but I'm having what Dwiggy's buddy over here calls a fanboy moment. But you've got James Dwiggins in the house this morning. Good morning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. We tend to keep things very mild and very PC here at RWorld Talk, but we're going to give Mr. Dwiggins some creative license this morning. We're going to take a deep dive into some pretty hot topics with what's happening in the industry. So I just want you guys to know that if you are going to miss one of our podcasts, this is not the one to miss. So James, why don't we start off with you telling us about how you got into your journey into real estate?
Well, I'm an SOB, son of a broker.
Okay.
You don't need to edit that. You're fine. My grandfather started his company in 1967. And so my grandparents were both brokers. My parents were both brokers. So I grew up literally my entire life in a real estate family. I do. Yeah.
You've seen a few markets.
I have. I've literally been in the industry long enough to know what the MLS book was. So,
okay.
My father was an association president. My grandfather was an association president way back when. And, I've seen the industry grow up. My grandfather had an ERA franchise. I actually know what ERA stood for back then with the fax machine. This has been in my blood. So I've tried to get out of real estate like most of us. I love the industry, but I keep trying to find a way out, but it just sucks me back in.
Yeah.
So I was involved with my parents' company for a while. Then I got involved in prop tech. So I was able to work in the tech side of the business for a while, which was fun. So I've seen that side of the business as well as the brokerage side. And then I got involved in the franchise side of it back in 2006. Went to work for a company called RWorld, which is a large regional franchise in Northern California.
Yeah.
Had about 400 offices, worked there for a while. My partner and I ended up buying that company and then started Next Home in 2014. And then now we have a national real estate franchise as well, about 613 offices across the US. So
wow.
It's been a journey.
Kind of a big deal in real estate.
I mean, we've had a good time. It's been fun and experiencing a lot of aspects of the industry. So,
okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I know a lot of our viewers and a lot of our listeners follow what it is that you're doing, and you've really got your ear to the ground with everything real estate. You've been on plenty of national stages. I know that right now you're currently going all over the country. What sort of led you into? You're co-founder of Raise. Raise is something for you guys that may not know. I guess a lot of you wouldn't know because this is still in MLS Board of Directors world. But we did take on a partnership and invested into your new platform,
Yep.
Raise.
Yep.
Super excited to be able to bring that to you guys, our MLS subscribers for Beaches MLS. So we're going to be offering that as a benefit to our subscribers. How do you see this partnership enhancing the business of realtors and the way that we transact business? I mean, right now we're going after buyers the same way that traditionally we've gone after listings. So buyers have tons of choice. We really have to prove our value. So what is Raise going to be able to offer us to help prove our value to the consumer?
Yeah. So, the biggest problem we have as an industry right now is people are questioning what we do as a profession. And I think that most of that comes from the fact that the work that we do is behind the scenes. So if you think about when you go show a property, you're going to drive to the property. You're going to, first call a listing agent, maybe set up an appointment, have a conversation, go to the property, meet the client there, spend 5-10 minutes in the driveway having a brief discussion, go tour the property for 30 minutes. They're going to be like, hey, go call a listing agent, I'm interested to know more. So they're going to drive back to your office, call a listing agent, have a conversation, get the disclosure, read the disclosure, write an email. You're 3 to 4 hours in, but the client only saw about 30 minutes of that. And so we did a study with the Wave Group early last year, and it was really fascinating to see some of the results. And we asked questions, and a lot of those questions were various things about the transaction, but one of them is what buyers thought, how much time an agent spends to helping them buy a house.
And they think we just flip a switch. And
and they're going to get really upset, or your viewers and listeners will, but the average buyer, about 46, almost 50% of them think that agents spend less than 15 hours to help them buy a house.
Wow.
So we started tracking all of that information, and that's what Raise really is about. It's an app that you install on your phone. It's basically going to look at your movement. It's going to see how long it took you to drive there. It's going to see how long you're at an appointment. It's going to track the phone call you have with the listing agent for 45 minutes, not what's in the phone call, just the duration of the call.
Sure.
And it brings all of this to light. And what we realized is the average real estate transaction in the US is about 56 days, 87 hours worth of work, and there's about 200 outcomes an agent will do. But the buyer only sees this tiny little percentage of it. So when you shift that conversation and you show them the transparency of what you do, they stop questioning your value. They're not like, well, what do you do for the money you're charging? Like, whoa, I had no idea there was that much work involved in the process. Gives the agents confidence to talk about it, gives the buyer more information about what's going on. And then we built an app that lays out those 200 things for the buyer. And as the agent's doing them, it's automatically updating the buyer in real time. So on Super Bowl Sunday, when the agent's taking a phone call and the buyer's partying, the agent's spending 45 minutes on the phone, they get updated that like, hey, your agent was just working for you for 45 minutes today. And so what it does is it gives the agent incredible confidence to articulate their value clearly in a beautiful buyer presentation. One of the best I've ever seen in the industry. I'm not being biased. Like we just launched it. It's incredible. So it shows and lays all this out. The app gives you this ability to show your value during the transaction. So you're continuing to show what you're doing. So it's cumulative. The buyer is working with you and they're just seeing time allocate. And they're like, wow, my agent's already spent 60 hours with me and we haven't even written an offer yet. Right. And then at the end of the transaction, we create a closing report and it lays out every single detail about what you did so that when they're writing the check, they're going, okay, like, wow, there was 22 pages worth of work here. So it's a really interesting product at a very unique time where we're having a lot of people question what we do. Certainly the mainstream media has done a fantastic job of misleading the entire American population about our profession. And, this is designed to push back on that. And so we launched the product in September. We onboarded about 156 brokerages across the US for our sort of V1 trial of the program, got tons of feedback. And then we just recently launched V2 and it is amazing. So I think, yeah, it is.
I can't imagine, obviously on Sunday, everybody's going to be watching the Super Bowl. If you're currently using Raise and you've got a push notification going out to your buyer saying, hey, this is the amount of time that I just spent. And they're thinking to themselves like, my God, we're all watching the Super Bowl. What are you doing working on my behalf? Think about the amount of value that creates. And it's incredible what you guys are doing with that platform. So talking about that platform and all of those things that we're going to go through, what does that statement look like at the end? Are you actually calculating every hour that was spent and every moment and every car ride and every search? I mean, a CMA can sometimes take hours to put together.
Yeah.
When you're running comps for a buyer and making all of those adjustments, people don't realize the amount of time that goes into something like that.
The answer is yes, we are. The agent can toggle that stuff on and off. So they can show hours or not. They can show mileage or not. But we use all of that data behind the scenes for the agent to look at their business. So here's some of the interesting stuff that's come out of it. When we have buyers go through the experience, the first thing they comment is like, I've never experienced something like that before. It's amazing to see the work that's going on.
Awesome.
So that's the reinforcement of value throughout that experience. The ending part, they're usually, when they get the closing report, they kind of feel almost guilty. Like, because
as they should.
Like, yeah, right. It's like, whoa, I didn't realize like how much time was going on. We're actually playing with a version of Raise that will come out soon where we lay out the compensation. And the reason we do that, and it's again optional, but the reason we're going to do that is because the buyer thinks that the agent makes the gross commission when it's not. Like They don't actually make that. There's broker split, there's taxes, there's health insurance costs, there's operational costs. And so my point behind it is what we've also found is when agents actually look at what they're doing work-wise, and then we break that down, they also have an epiphany of, I'm not charging enough. Like the ironic part is if most agents, I say this lovingly, don't have a P&L or a balance sheet and look at,
which none of them do.
Right. So I'm trying to be polite, but when you actually break this stuff down for them, they'll look at it and go, I was only making like $50 an hour.
Right.
So there's this shift that's going to occur. And it's interesting to watch where, if you think about where we are today as a society, you order your Uber, you can see when the car's showing up, what type of car it is, how many stops in between, the time to get to the location, like everything is transparent. Same thing with your pizza, either with Domino's Pizza or Amazon or anything has this transparent experience. Real estate is the most behind the scenes industry possible. So the society is moving this direction. Our industry hasn't caught up. We're about to push everybody into this future, but this future is actually better because it'll do two things. Really, not very good agents are going to be shown they're not very good at what they do, and people will question what that is, which is, I think, great for the industry. But the agents that are very good at what they do, I believe, and I've said this for the past year and a half through all of this litigation that's been going on, I've been telling nonstop, and people think I've been nuts. I'm like, good agents will charge more because they will be able to articulate their value very clearly. And if you look at every study in America today, doesn't matter what it is, recent Ring Central study that just came out, Basically, a majority of consumers will pay for a premium for service and convenience. Like I use this example on my keynotes. I go, how many of you would love to call Verizon to talk about your bill? And you're like, hell no, right? But if you could pay $5 a month extra in your bill to have a direct line to a customer service representative where you call and they answer within 30 seconds, most
Take
people
my money.
take my money, right? So I think in our industry, we have to get better at what we do, but the consumer is willing to pay more if they find value in it. Raise does exactly that. And so we're very excited about where this is going to go. And a lot of companies are starting to look at what we're doing and wanting to copy it, which is fine because the product is invested by the industry. We want the industry to have this product.
Right.
And, otherwise I would have built it internally for my own organization, but we're not. We're trying to make this so that the industry moves forward. I think that people have been scared about replacing the agent. I completely disagree. The average consumer in America will buy a house 2 to 3 times in their lifetime at most. It's an infrequent transaction. In 1960, dual income households was 30%. Today it's 60%. My wife has a career in television. We have a 3.5-year-old terrorist who I love dearly. We don't wake up and go, let's just sell our house on our own. People don't have that kind of time. They want someone to help them through this transaction. And so I think it just comes down to how well you can articulate that value and show what you do.
People already want to work with somebody who they know, like, and trust.
Right.
But then the problem is they get to you, and if you're not articulating your value to that person, they're thinking, I wonder how cheap I can get him to work for.
Right. It's almost rude when you talk to an agent that's empowered by Raise because they're showing all of this value to ask them to reduce their fee when they're showing you the work that's involved.
Which one of these 200 things would you like to do on your own?
And that's exactly the conversation we want to have with them is go, what would you like me to take out of this experience? Well, none of it. Well, there's hard costs to do all of this work. And this is the thing, our industry, I do this in all my keynotes. We need to get way, way better at articulating the fact that most of the industry, not all, because there is no set fee, but most of the industry operates off a contingency fee.
Right.
And those words are really important. You can do 6 months worth of work with a buyer. Everybody here has had that happen, where then not buy. And all of that time basically just got thrown away. You don't get paid. So it's not like the legal industry where they bill you every 15 minutes for stuff.
Exactly.
It's the opposite. It's that we're going to do all of this work on weekends, 7 days a week, and then in the hopes that you buy a house, of which, by the way, we're not dictating anything. It's a contingency fee. So our industry just needs to have a much better talk track when we're explaining things to consumers.
Yeah, I was just talking to an agent yesterday, and she said, I couldn't believe that I had to show 42 houses to this couple. And I went to look at the 42nd house, thinking to myself, if you do not buy this house today, we're done here, because I just feel like I'm never going to get to the closing table with you. And they walked into that 42nd house and said, oh my God, this is the one, let's write a contract. And
she made nothing on that deal.
Really? I mean, if you think about her hourly rate for all of the work that she did,
that deal.
She was working for pennies on, for pennies an hour.
If she had been using Raise halfway through that experience, I bet you a quarter way through that experience, when she would have seen the breakdown of time, she would have fired her clients.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Or changed the way that she operates her business. Right. So this is the part that our industry has to think about is, I do think comp models will shift more than what they already have. I think that in those examples, it's a great example. You have to put a limit on time. Otherwise, it doesn't make any logical sense. And so you're going to see as we bring more transparency to the way agents operate, they're going to get more creative on how they bill for their business.
So, yeah, and I think with somebody like that, where you've shown so many homes, being able to sit down with those people and have a conversation and say, we really need to think about what we've looked at in the past and really get laser focused on what it is that your needs are in order for me to assist you get into the right home. Because at this point, if I just keep showing you homes over and over and over again, I mean, I'm basically just buying the home for you. So,
another point you're making, Chris, which is ironic. So inside the app that we built, what we realized was most of the time, not most, but a good portion of the time is on showing properties. And so in the experience that the consumer has, every house they tour is added into a carousel. And it's either shown as upcoming tour, declined, or they wrote an offer on it. So every house that they visited is there. And in that experience, we're accumulating time. So they'll see all of the activities and all of the time spent. So the customer is being reminded on the 10th showing, that we've shown you 10 houses. We've spent 65 hours with you already.
Right.
So it's subconsciously making them realize that they're also needing to be respectful of working with their client. And that's a shift that I think our industry needs. This is a two-way street. We work very hard for our clients. They don't know and know how to appreciate that. We're bridging that gap too.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think that the future is certainly bright for that platform, and it's really making waves throughout the industry, and I think that it's going to be a game changer for us all, and we appreciate it. So thank you for coming up with something like that. So you had an interview a couple of months ago, did parents and grandparents in the business, but why don't you tell us about your passion for the Realtor brand? I mean, has your upbringing had anything to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think about my mom, who was the breadwinner. She worked incredibly hard. She raised 2 kids, and this career provided her that ability to have the flexibility to be there for our soccer tournaments and all of those things, and then also have this amazing career that gave me the gift of what I have today. I think that we've had some challenges with the Realtor brand, and in some ways
we don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and look. I think that there are brighter days ahead. There is certainly some bad PR that we've had, and I think our industry lost sight a little bit about what we were trying to do. Our industry, and specifically the National Association of Realtors, as well as state and local, need to be better at articulating their value, and they need to be rethinking what that is in this new future. We can't just keep doing things the old way. It has to evolve.
Right.
I also will say that the membership needs to do its part. This is a two-way street.
100%.
So I get so sick and tired of hearing people badmouth the association. And I throw rocks. Like, I'm not afraid to do it, but I'm educated on what the association does.
Right.
And so for me, I do this. This is also something I'm taking around the country. People don't realize how important the advocacy is that is being done at the local, state, and national level, so that 1.5 million people have a job. And let me explain.
Yeah.
So every year, Shannon McGann, shout out to her and her team, she's incredible, works so incredibly hard to make sure that bills don't get passed that would destroy private property rights in this country. Now, the organization as a whole needs to figure out how to articulate these things better. It's not just the bills that were passed, it's the bills they squashed. And without that advocacy and the lobbying that's going on there, it would take a few years before politicians, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, will destroy so many things that we benefit from. And I'll give you 2 examples. The 1099 status that 1.5 million people benefit from is on the chopping block every year.
I was just going to say every year.
I can tell you, and I'm not trying to be rude to the membership here, but if the 1099 status went away, 70% of you would be fired instantly.
Yep.
You would not be hired as a W-2 based employee, because the word broke in brokerage is there for a reason. They do not make as much money as agents think they do.
Yep.
You have been making the lion's share of the revenue for a long time. So this idea that this organization needs to change or it's not needed anymore is so naive to me. It blows my mind when I hear these comments. And the $76 or whatever the number is today, triple it for all I care. Like, to me, that kind of work is important. And the association needs to change. It needs to evolve. It is bloated. There needs to be some governance changes. And I have spent a significant amount of time with Nakia Wright. I've had the opportunity to have dinner with her on occasions, and I have been so impressed by her leadership. She is a change leader. She is not going to be sitting there going, we're going to do things the same way. Her hiring Sherry Chris on her, personal cabinet,
Game changer.
Brilliant move, right?
Excellent.
How do you fix the relationship with the $2 billion club? Hire somebody respected by the $2 billion club to go create that olive branch. So I think you're going to see significant changes. She's smart. She's calculated. She knows exactly how to turn businesses around. That's the kind of things that need to happen. And I got to give credit to Kevin Sears and the leadership team for bringing someone on like her that is not from within the ranks.
Like, when she came on, all of us went, "What in the world
Exactly.
are you thinking?"
Right.
And but then you see the track record of what she's done in such a short period of time, and it's really changed the narrative.
Well, that's
It's incredible.
exactly what needed to happen, is bringing somebody that's not, not in the club or the inner circle upward, to come in and look at everything was a very smart move on their part. And you're seeing that evolve because of it. So the membership is, saying what's changing? Well, a lot of things are changing, actually. Pay attention.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the association doesn't need to evolve. And we have to figure out, I talk about, in my opinion, associations need to get way more proactive with communication and stories with the press. We're very reactive. I think we should be proactive. How do we make sure that the conversations that are being picked up by the press are not always negative?
Right.
So we have we have public affairs people, but they're responding to articles. I think if we flip the script and said, look, here's interesting things that are happening, and we become this source of information for news reporters. Right. So I'm married to a news reporter for CBS. I know this better than most because I get to hear her conversations. Sorry, baby. And so, they're looking for stories. The news media has shifted so much in this country that, when she started working at CBS, she had a full-time photographer with her. They had the news van, et cetera. Half the story, she's out there with her cell phone. They don't have the budgets. So 9:30, she's on a call with the producers talking about the stories. Most of the stories she gets, she's looking up 3 hours before. And then she has 4 hours to turn a story around.
Right.
So if knowing that's how this industry, the news industry has shifted, if we're the ones providing information, it's going to balance out this negative PR. So I see that's a great opportunity for the association to own that, both at local, state, and national. And the more we think about that, then people are going to go, damn, my association is rocking it. Like, we are getting really positive stuff out there. That starts to turn this concern about, value proposition.
When I was president in 2023, I went through several times in the same year, went through the Florida Realtor Spokesperson Training Program, because, you get tons and tons of media requests. And it's really about giving them the proper sound bites that are really controlling our narrative. But then you go and see the story that came out, and because your sound bites weren't the juiciest stuff that they were really looking for, they're going to go elsewhere and try to find that information or write.
It's all about clicks.
It's really all about clicks. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna get into CCP for all you guys that are wondering. Certainly we're going to talk about it. But something like that. You see a lot of what Inman puts out. You get those clickbait stories that come out, the headlines, and I think what a lot of our membership really fails with is not being subscribed to these media outlets and reading the full story. Because if you're only looking at the headlines, you're coming up with a different narrative in your mind than what the actual story is. They're making money off getting us to click on those stories.
You mean like social media, where nobody
like social media, yeah. But you've really got to get through the story to find out what's going on. And I think a lot of times that narrative is out of our hands and in the hands of somebody else. So I think the more that, like we've talked about, articulating our own value to the consumer. And let's flip this for a second. One thing that I find is a lot of us in the industry, we're talking to the consumers and giving them all of this information that they absolutely do not need. It's things that we are paying attention to because we're the ones as realtors that are looking at the real estate news stories, right? It's not being portrayed to the public. You're not seeing this stuff on all the major news outlets that people are actually watching TV in the morning and getting their information from. We're the only ones that are talking about it. So I would task our membership, anybody across the country, stop telling those stories and stop giving the consumer so much information that you're confusing the whole process. They came to you to buy a lifestyle. You're out there introducing them to the lifestyle that they need. You're solving the problems that they have. There's no need to give them the entire backstory about where we came from and how we got to today. Just go out there and do your damn job.
Yeah, and I think that your comments very on track with provide content that the consumer actually cares about.
Correct.
And if you don't know, just ask. They'll tell you.
Right.
Just pay attention, right? I ask people all the time, do you survey your clients? They're like, no. Okay, well, start there. I have this, it's so funny. I have this.
The days of the buyer consultation are gone.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I actually think we should get back to some of that.
And I 100% agree.
Like, sit down and ask your client questions. What is their long-term plan? Are they wanting to stay here? Are they planning to have more kids? Do they gonna have more pets? What's the job? Is there a relocation coming? Like, figure out what your client is doing. You're establishing rapport with them.
Right.
And the more you do that, you're building that relationship. And so this is a whole other podcast, but it needs to be much deeper than just a transactional relationship. And that's where our industry really struggles. We have to be thinking much more about how do we maintain that relationship over the 8 to 13 years they'll own that property so that they come back to you. That's the funny part, that I say this all the time and people kind of look at me and then the light bulb clicks on. I'm like, if we actually maintained the relationship with our clients, there wouldn't be real estate portals.
That's true.
because they wouldn't be going back to a portal because they would just come back to you.
You'd be the
And
source
so
of information.
and the portals know this. They know the fact that agents are horrible at following up with their clients, and that at the end of the transaction, they're going to eventually end up back on, whatever portal that they want to go to. They become a lead again that gets shifted back down to somebody, and then they charge a referral fee, and it's just this wash, rinse, repeat. But if we were to break that cycle and actually maintain that relationship, the customer has been talking to you for 9 to 13 years. When they think about selling their house, they're not going to go to a portal. They're going to call you and be like, hey, by the way, we had dinner, a month ago, thinking about selling my house. Oh, and all of a sudden the entire game shifts.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting where we came from. When I first got my start 20 years ago, we would always meet in the office, go through the buyer consultation. What are your pain points in the current house that you have? What is it that you're looking for in a new property? Now we've moved on to a place, because I think there's so much information online. We used to be the stewards of the information. Now the information is readily available to everyone. So by the time they get to you, you're so excited that somebody actually called or emailed or answered one of the you bought a lead off of a portal, and now you've got somebody who says, oh, I want to see 123 Main Street. Boom, you're in the car going to show them the property without even knowing what their needs are for a home. When if you have that buyer consultation, instead of you spending all that time taking them to see that house, you could say, listen, it doesn't have dual vanities, the property is not fenced, and it doesn't have a pool. You just tell me that you've got a dog, and you're like all of these things that you need to work out to find out exactly what their motivation is to buy. That craft is completely gone these days.
And they see you as transactional
there.
They just see you as like, show up, open the door.
Yeah.
That's how they look at you.
And write the paper so I can sign it and let's be done.
And there's the problem.
Yeah. So let's get into CCP. This is what everybody's been wanting to talk about lately. I know that it is, I shouldn't say everybody, because certainly when you go to any sort of association event or an MLS forum or anything like that, nobody wants to talk about CCP. Everybody's worried about where the industry is going, what kind of lawsuits are going to come out of a conversation like that. But certainly I know that you're not afraid to talk about tough topics. So let's talk about fiduciary duty. Let's talk about CCP and sort of where we think that may be going, and why I know that you think that it would be a detriment for it to go away. Other people disagree with you. What do you think is the future for the clear cooperation policy?
So the first thing I would say is you have to have history to understand the reason the policy is there.
Right.
And so I do this question when I'm with audiences. I ask how many people have been in the business since 2019, and people raise their hand. How many of you just came in after? Basically, around 50% of realtors weren't here in 2019 when this was being discussed.
Right.
So the first problem is we have to re-educate everybody why the policies exist. This is something MLS needs to do a better job of. It's not just you're going to get fined for not doing something. Give them the reasons why. So I'll go back. So when I ran RWorld in Silicon Valley, it was a 420 office operation in Northern California. It was a big footprint. And in 2012 and 2013, Jim Harrison, MLS Listings, I remember the conversation, was starting to track off-market transactions. So these weren't as popular because you didn't have so much ability to broadcast information, portals, basically. So agents were holding things off-market, using the listing as a billboard to get inquiries, and then they would try to double-end deals and just keep it off-market, or they created private listing networks, which literally are exclusionary in practice. When you say private, you're excluding people, okay? Whole different conversation. But at one point,
who is it that you're excluding? Which is how we end up in fair housing violation world.
Yeah. If you go back further, and this is important for people to understand, I remember when my parents would pick up an MLS book, and every month a book was printed, papers. Everybody understands what that means. A book, right?
Real thick book.
Yeah, real thick book. And it was all the listings that were available, but it was always 30 days after a time frame. So some of these properties were sold within that time frame or put into contract. And so you didn't know what was for sale unless you had access to the book, and then you had to call everybody and see if something was for sale, because unless you drove around, you wouldn't know what was available. I'll go back even further than that, and then I'll answer your question. My grandfather and I used to meet on Tuesdays, and we would have pizza and beer. This is really important. And I said, I'd ask him tons of questions as a mentor. I said, how did you grow your company so big? So in the 80s, his ERA franchise was 120 some agents, which for that time frame would be like 1,000 agents today. Big operation. There just wasn't many realtors.
Right.
And so he made this comment. I never understood it until recently. He goes, I grew it because I had the inventory. Because if you have the inventory, agents have to work at your brokerage in order to get access to it.
Okay.
Really important comment here.
Right.
Because if you've got all the inventory and you don't get access to the book until a period of time later to know what properties are for sale, and you want to get access to those, you needed to work in the company that had all the listings.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
Fast forward, history repeats itself. We go to a point where in Silicon Valley, at certain markets, had 30% of the inventory off market. You didn't have access to it. And you wouldn't know what was for sale, and buyers wouldn't know what was for sale. And so you're having to go to 30 different websites to figure out what's for sale. It's a fragmented market. We've created the greatest marketplace in the world. It's not perfect. It has issues. It continues to evolve. But every single country around the world is trying to mimic what we have spent 30 years building. And so we've created a marketplace that any buyer can go to any website in real estate that's a member of the MLS and get access to the inventory and be able to see what's for sale.
Sure.
We get rid of all fair, not all, but we basically gotten rid of most of the fair housing issues. There's not exclusionatory practices that are there. And sellers get the benefit of having an open marketplace where everybody can see what's for sale to bring in the most amount of offers, which 99.9% of sellers want the highest sales price. The end. So to me, this concept of CCP is bad because it requires you to put a property in the MLS that you're a member of, MLS rules that you're a member of.
Right.
You don't have to be a member of the MLS. You can choose not to be. That if you want to put a property out and market it publicly, it's got to go in the MLS within 24 hours because everybody follows the same protocol.
Right.
Okay?
What about our duty to cooperate that's written right in the Code of Ethics?
It's literally like, so this idea that we're going to test the market, we're going to see what the market does, we're not going to accumulate days on market. I'm going to really irritate people right now. I want to be very clear about this statement. There's days on market and there's days on MLS. I have personally spoken to 3 real estate attorneys and 2 real estate commissioners on the record.
Right.
Days on market begins when you have a listing agreement and you have begun to actively sell that property. Even if it's an office exclusive, even if it's not on the MLS.
Even if it's not a listing agreement, but a commission agreement? It's everything. I'm in agreement with you.
It is very clear to the commissioners I spoke to that said if you have an agreement and you are actively selling the property, and if somebody was to write an offer, the seller would look at it to sell. It is days on market. So this idea, we are going to exclude that. I want to be very clear with what the commissioners said. It is misrepresentation, which is potentially revocable license, and it could be fraud if the buyer can prove damages. Both commissioners said it, all 3 lawyers said it. So there's days on MLS and there's days on market. And I want to be, people are completely conflating the two, and you are going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you're not paying attention to that. Further,
you also need to paint a true picture of the property in your advertising. So that's right in our Code of Ethics as well. So if you've had this property that was technically on the market, it just so happened that you didn't see it as a realtor because you weren't working with the company that had that listing, that property is still on the market. So now if you go and put that on the MLS and say, no, this property is 0 days on the market, just hit today. That's not true. You're not painting a true picture of that property in your advertising. You're misrepresenting it.
Correct.
Because it has been on the market for 60 days.
Correct. Yes. And that is something I can tell you that both commissioners told me that they are absolutely going to pursue that.
Okay.
And they will make an example out of people to knock that behavior off.
I hope
so. Listening. I can't emphasize enough. Look, I understand the market's tough. I've been in this my whole life. We had the worst real estate market, arguably since 2008 last year, and everyone's trying to make a deal come together. A lot of companies are trying to figure out how to increase their profits. I get it. It's capitalism. I'm not against that, okay? And if you ask the seller, what's the most important thing you want to get out of this? 9 times out of 10, 99.9% of the time, they're going to look for the highest sales price. You have an obligation to tell them the open marketplace is going to give you the greatest opportunity to have more buyers see it and more offers come in. There is no debate that is logical that holding a property off MLS will create more offers. I can't find one that's logical about it. And so it's all, and this is the part that frustrates me, it's all about the conversation you are having with the seller. If I tell the seller, look, here's the deal. We're going to test the market and we're going to play with it. And I'm going to tell all the other agents in my company about it. And maybe we'll bring a buyer, we have a buyer. And that way you don't have to have showings and no one's going to walk through your home and we're going to disrupt your kid's schedule and steal anything. I'm going to use the word that is steering them into a direction. Versus if you are having a conversation where you're saying, look, We're going to put it on the greatest marketplace in the world. It's going to have the most amount of visibility possible. We're going to bring the most amount of offers, and this is going to get you the highest sales price. We can find ways to mitigate disrupting your kid's schedule and things. We can work through that. But this is to achieve the result of the highest sales price possible. This is the marketplace that does it. And by the way, days on MLS or days on market, Facebook Marketplace, when you put anything on there, it shows when the item was listed.
Right.
eBay, Car Gurus. I could go down every single possible portal,
Right.
and they all show when an item was listed. That's information that's disclosed to the buyer. So we're going to end up with one thing, and I'll stop off this. You are already seeing lawsuits fly because sellers were told this was going to be better. They look at the price, they compare it to somebody else's property that was similar that sold and got a higher price. They start digging and they go, why is it that we didn't have more offers? My friend down the street got 10 offers. We only had 2 offers.
And why did we
Why
get exposed?
Why didn't we get that? And there's a company here who's already been sued here in Florida for having an off-market deal. And here's the problem that everybody's missing. The United States legal system is one of the most, use my words correctly here, it is not the best legal system in the world. It has a lot of problems because the lawyers know you can sue for anything. They know that the process is convoluted. The cost to go to trial is going to be extreme. And so what happens on every single lawsuit, most of them, they settle because settling is cheaper than going to trial. Because
Nobody ever goes to trial.
Exactly. And so what agents don't understand is that what will happen here is if you get sued, you have one of 2 options. If your E&O carrier covers you, good, congratulations. That is going to be a problem in the future too. But brokers, if they can't pay it, an agent can't pay it, you have one choice, that's bankruptcy. Because if lawyer fees are going to be $1,000 an hour these days, and I know agents don't have that kind of cash, you will see lawsuits fly. You're going to see them come out because sellers are going to go, yeah, I felt like I got harmed. The lawyer goes, look, we can sue them. And they're going to settle because it's cheaper than going to trial. And then the E&O costs are going to go up. And eventually what will happen, because I have this data, E&O comes, you go, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore if you're doing this practice or you're doing dual agency because the risk is going up for us, or the costs for E&O are going to be so high, the broker goes, well, I'm not going to cover that. All my agents are going to pay for it. Or eventually you can't get E&O insurance.
In California, do you guys operate as single agents or as transaction brokers?
So we don't do transaction broker. That's a Florida and a few other state thing. You guys kind of have some interesting things you do down here. So it's single agent. Yeah. So in California, you can do single agent, dual agency. So the definitions vary by state. So one agent can represent the buyer and seller. I hate that practice. So it's banned. That practice is banned in 9 states across the US. I want to see it banned in all 50 because there's no possibility that you don't have bias. Your seller told you something, your buyer told you something, but James, I know and I can help put a deal together. No, there's a reason why the plaintiff and the defendant can't have the same law firm or a lawyer in the same law firm.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah,
So,
I was got my license first in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and there you could not have any type of dual agency. So if I ended up having a buyer for my own listing, I would have to find somebody within my company in order to take care of that buyer in order to put the transaction.
correct. And that's still allowed in most states. And I'm not opposed to that, but the risk is a lot less if you just refer it out and you can refer it to somebody else in your company, but you create that separation. That will be the next conversation. You're going to see a lot of topics around dual agency in the next 24 months.
Okay. Obviously, we've had the lawsuit, we've had the settlement. There's now been an urgency for agents to sort of redefine their practices, take a really deep dive in their value proposition. What other kind of tips do you have for outside from obviously the Raise platform that is going to be able to help us articulate that value? What other kinds of advice can you give to our agents that are really trying to come out of this with their head held high and to get back to business? I mean, we know that there's so much noise out there, but what could they really be doing today to sort of hone their skills and really be able to articulate
So
the value?
first thing is that everyone needs to understand the settlement terms and stop trying to skirt the rules. The plaintiff's lawyers have come out and stated exactly what the settlement terms are as their understanding of it. NAR has finally come out. On our podcast, we have a 2-part podcast where it's general counsel explaining every single detail.
I saw that one with Leslie. You did a fantastic job.
Great podcast. Everyone should watch that because she talks about what you can and can't do. And candidly, a lot of people in Florida. So we have like 95 offices here in Florida, so I'm pretty familiar with it. There's a lot of practices going on that need to stop here. You can't receive builder bonuses. That's not allowed. You cannot modify your buyer rep agreement unless you are materially changing the services that you offered. And that is a gray area I would not get into.
Right. Can we stay on that for 1 second? Because this is something that I'm having a lot of conversations. I'm a broker myself. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people in our association that say, my broker told me otherwise. And I'm begging them to listen to me and tell them to have their broker call me, or I'll reach out to their broker and say, can we have a conversation about this? Because what you're advising your agents to do, you absolutely should not be doing, because you're going to get sued all over again, because now this is going to be something completely different. But there is a common misconception, in my opinion, out there based on these settlement terms, that when you call a listing agent, the listing agent says, oh, I'm willing to, my seller is offering X. Well, you've got a buyer brokerage agreement that you negotiated with your buyer, and that buyer was able to get you at a lower rate. And now you say, oh, the seller is offering more money. Let's do this modification. And we do in the state of Florida have a modification to the buyer form. So we have agents that are out there because their brokers are telling them, just modify it and go to whatever it is that the seller is offering. I want you to touch on that.
Chris, so I am a named defendant. I have been through the litigation. I settled. I have 2 more cases going. The buy-side cases haven't settled. So I really want everybody to listen to me here. Nobody understands what it's like to go through this unless you're spending $100,000 a month in legal fees.
Right.
Okay. So we ended up, by the time my legal fees and settlement's done, it's a 7-figure number. 99% of you can't afford that. The only person's opinion that matters is the plaintiff's, because if they don't like what you're doing, they're going to sue you, and then you are going to be in a position where you're going to either defend or settle. And 99% of you will bankrupt your business because there's not enough business to go around to do it. It is so very clear to me, and I have spoken to the lawyers, so I know very clearly what their interpretation is. You cannot modify your buyer rep agreement unless you are changing materially the terms of what you agreed to. I'll use an example. You agreed to 100 hours worth of work, and now it's going to require 200 hours worth of work. That is a material change the buyer's requesting, and if they agree to the change, you can modify it. But there's a reason why the buyer rep agreement is signed before you show properties. Everyone misses this. The reason why that's in there is so that you agree to a rate of what you're going to charge, as well as your services offered and what you're going to give them and all the terms of that prior to seeing any house, so that you avoid steering. Right. That's the point. So
now it's transparent, and you're not going to go and take them somewhere that is going to be offering more.
It does not, I get so worked up about this. It does not matter what the seller is offering. It doesn't matter. So we trained our 6,000 people. We don't call and ask the seller what they're offering. We don't call a listing agent. I could care less what the listing agent is offering. We don't do cooperative compensation because it's a bad practice that's going to get you sued.
Yep.
We always have the seller pay buyer brokerage direct. I don't want to trade any money between companies because that's literally the conspiracy.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
It's just so stupid. People are not getting this, that if you're continuing to do the same practice, you're going to get sued eventually. They're waiting for a new class. They're going to give it time to create a new class. But to your point, the buyer rep agreement is designed for you to write out your fee. That's what we agreed to. Show them new builds, resale, doesn't matter what the seller is offering. You ask one question of the buyer: can you afford to pay this fee independently, or do you want me to make this part of the deal terms? And the buyer says, make it part of the deal terms. It's great. We're going to show you every property possible. We're going to make it part of the deal terms. I don't care whether the seller's offering anything or not. If they want to sell their damn house, they're going to pay the fee. The end. Right. And it's so simple to me. So this idea of like, oh yeah, well, they're offering more, or the new developer's offering a $50,000 bonus. Congratulations, you can't receive that. You agreed to the fee. That's what your fee is. Unless you're materially changing the terms of your services, do not modify that buyer rep agreement, or you're going to get yourself in trouble. Right. It's going to happen. And they're going to make an example out of someone. Also, it's just cheap. You agreed to the damn fee. Do your job, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a bonus, have it go to the buyer. Be like, we want a credit of X towards cabinets or closing cost, whatever you want to do. But if you are...
And look what a rock star you're going to look like to that buyer, because you just got the upgraded kitchen and the bigger tile.
Put them at the front and center of what you do. You agreed to your services. That's what you charge. And people get mad at me for saying this. Test it. If you want to play with the lawyers, have at it. I have, and we're still going through litigation. They're not done. They're absolutely going to come back around because people try to skirt the rules. This isn't as complicated as everyone's making this out to be. California got rid of cooperative compensation, so 6 other states in their forms. Listing agent charges their fee, buyer's agent charges their fee, everything goes in the offer, it's a negotiation, and business continues as usual. And by the way, there's no worry about litigation. You're not sharing money between competitors. You're not potentially propping up compensation because you collected money and are remitting it to a competitor.
Right.
Like this is just stops all this stuff. And the faster the industry gets there, we're going to be able to focus on the future. But everyone thinks the settlement's done and like it's over. Here's the part that I asked my lawyers this question. I asked Leslie this question.
It's just beginning.
Yeah, I go, if someone's not following the settlement terms, what does that mean? The answer is you're not covered under the settlement, which means you are susceptible to the $1.78 billion judgment. Oh, I'm sorry, it's treble. So it's 3 times.
Right.
So do your job, follow the rules. You're going to get paid. The buyer agreed to it. By the way, the seller wants to sell their damn house. So they're going to pay compensation in order to make it happen. Like if we just move forward, I use in my keynote, skate to where the puck is going to be. This industry is going to be just fine. Consumers want to pay you. They'll pay a premium for service. Start following what this is. And brokers that don't know the difference, educate yourself. If you don't know, call me, email me, follow one of my pods. We'll give you every single thing you wanted to know about this process, and you're going to be just fine. So
if you guys want to be entertained in what is happening in the real estate world and hear it in a way that we can't deliver here on RWorld Talk because we're an association podcast, tune in to Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered. That is James's podcast. It is hilarious. It is incredibly informative. And you guys do it every week.
Every week, yeah. Keith and I do. My partner in crime, Keith Robinson. It is a funny show between the two of us.
It is hilarious. I actually listen to it while I'm in the gym. That's how entertaining this thing is. Most people are like, cranking the tunes, but no, I'm always trying to stay up to date on what's happening. But you guys do it in a way that it's uplifting, it's funny, and if you see me in the gym and I'm just like cracking up while I'm doing a set, it's because I'm listening to these guys.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of fun making fun of yourselves too.
We do, but we also have really interesting guests. We get sort of the top level guests in the industry to come on the show, which makes it entertaining as well. So
okay, well, send some my way.
Yeah.
Let's go through our last question because I know that you've got to jump on a flight and get to somewhere else in the country. So we're going to throw your rapid fire back at you, which I hear on your podcast all the time. So let's talk about your favorite book or your favorite podcast.
I'll go with podcasts, and I'm about to get canceled now. I love listening to the Joe Rogan Experience.
Interesting.
I do. I find him funny. I find the guests funny, and I have a very dry sense of humor, as you can probably tell. So like I love mostly listening to the diversity of his guests. He has the most interesting people on that show. I mean, I listened to a couple of guests, I forget their names, where they talked about, geology and like how they believe an asteroid hit the polar ice cap. And they showed this stuff about how the formation of mountains was likely from a tidal wave. And I just find this stuff interesting, all the way to having, Mike Tyson on there and listening to him.
I think it's the ayahuasca.
It's probably that too. So I just, for me, I need a little bit of humor in my life. So I tend to go that route. My job is a little stressful. So I look for stuff that's interesting, but also adds humor to it. So I would say the Joe Rogan Experience is fun for me.
Okay. And dinner with anyone, currently here or past?
I'm going to cheat, as I always ask this question, but so I would love to have dinner with 2 people.
Okay.
My grandfather, who was one of my mentors, and my father, both have passed away. And so people don't know this. They always ask why I wear 2 rings. That's my dad's wedding ring. Okay. So I wear it just because it reminds me of him. I would love to have a conversation with him again, just from where I was in my career and time when he passed away in 2019, and then to today. He also never got to meet my daughter, and so. It would just be interesting to have lunch and then introduce my daughter to him. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure both of them would be incredibly proud of the man that you've become.
I hope so.
I know that you're certainly doing fantastic things for our industry. So we all thank you for that. And thank you certainly for coming out here and spending your morning with us. I know that you've got to hit a flight. There is a reason why we didn't ask him for his special gem in Florida, is because he lives in California and doesn't know any special gems here. So if you had more time, I would take you to some of our special gems.
I would love to.
But seriously, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an incredible chat. And for all of you guys listening, I hope that you enjoyed that one. And we will see you right back here next week on RWorld Talk.